Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Welcome to Snake Talk Episode 2. Today I'm going to introduce my my Superdwarf Reticulated python, Thomas Aristotle. He's got the two names because basically I liked both Thomas and Aristotle as possible names. My oldest son really liked Aristotle and my wife really liked Thomas. So I compromised by just giving him both names, and I kind of call him by both. He's about 7 months old now. I got him earlier in the year, and he was born in February. So I got him actually because if you've seen my interview with Garrett Hartle, Garrett lives not that far away from me, and so I got him relatively young, sort of before Garrett would normally ship him out, because, you know, with a short car drive away in case anything was going wrong, Garrett felt pretty safe with letting me try, because he'd had like 3 meals in him, I think, or maybe it was 4 when I first got him. It's been very interesting. I should mention, by the way, he's actually 50% Superdwarf. And actually both of his parents were 50% Superdwarf. So that's a little bit more variable of the lineage. For those who don't know, Superdwarf refers to being from a number of very small islands near Indonesia where the populations of reticulated pythons there have developed to be very small. Their maximum size that they grow to is nowhere near the maximum size of mainland reticulated pythons from like the main parts of Indonesia, for example. They live all over the big islands there. And reticulated pythons, they in many ways they have like a lot of subspecies, although those aren't scientifically recognized. But you have distinct populations that haven't interbred with each other for a long time. Although the snakes tend to be similar with some fairly distinct patterns on them. The Superdwarf Islands, they tend to get, on the smallest of them, they tend to get like 6-7 feet long. Then there are the dwarf islands, like Sulawesi and I'm sorry, not Sulawesi, Jampea and Selayar, and and Tambalanga as well, where they tend to be more like, Jampea is like very variable. You get some fairly big retics there, but also some fairly small retics that are more like in the 10-12 foot range. And then mainland reticulated pythons, like on the other, the big islands around there, will often be in the range of, like, males will tend to get like 10 to 12 feet. Females often get like 14 to 18 feet long, as like an average. With males can even get a little bigger than that. There's range on both. So males can get bigger and females can get bigger, and they can push into the 20 feet. I think the like best verified records of very large reticulated pythons, like the really good ones of living reticulated pythons, are in the like 22 foot range, I think, is in terms of like the biggest ones that people know in captivity. 22, 24 feet, somewhere around there. Although, like, as you're starting to really push those, and you can find records supposedly of ones that were more like 28 or 30 feet long in approximately that range, although to some degree you're talking at that point like how humans can get up to around 8 feet tall if you look at the occasional giant, like, Andre the Giant. Actually, he was only like 7.5 feet tall, I think. But anyway, so in the same way that you can find the occasional giant among humans, you can find the occasional giant among these snakes. But the mainlands get big. It is really, really normal for like a female mainland retic to get in the 16 foot range, 14 to 16 foot range, and weighing like, 100, 150 pounds. And then like snakes that big will tend to be pretty big around. Retics, by the way, do not get to be the most massive snakes in the world. That's anacondas, who get much thicker, and those things can easily weigh, from what I understand, like 400, even 600 pounds. Like, they can get big, really, really big. But the superdwarfs, not only are they shorter, but the other thing is they're much, much smaller in terms of girth. And so it makes a really big difference in terms of what a snake is like to hold them, because like when they're small around, they're vastly more compact. So like right now, he's 7 months old, And he is, his heritage, he's 25% kayuadi, which means from the species from the Kayuadi Island, or the island named Kayuadi, and 50% and 25% kalatoa. So one parent was half kayuadi, one parent was half kalatoa. And kayuadi is like tends to be a much more colorful population than, I'm not sure about the heritage on the mainland side, where that came from. There are a lot of islands that could be from. It's probably not very well known where his parents on that side came from. But like right now, if you actually like fully get him to unwind, he is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 feet long. Now, especially retics tend to be semi-arboreal. So semi-arboreal snakes especially, like, they don't normally ever unwind. But on the other hand, when he's not unwinding, he fits in a really small space, and he's not yet a big snake. No, he's going to grow a lot bigger than he presently is. Garrett estimates, based upon the bloodlines that Thomas is from, he's probably going to be in the 8 to 9 foot range. But he should be, what I expect him to be is a fairly slim-bodied 8 to 9 feet long. And so at 8 to 9 feet long, he might be, he's probably going to be a bit bigger than the mass of something like a ball python who's about 5 feet long. Although, a 5-foot ball python might be this big around, and at 8 or 9 feet, he should be, actually, I'm sorry. He should be I'm thinking of the pure superdwarfs that will be lighter even than a ball python, although it'll be several feet longer. He'll probably be a little heavier than a ball python, but not by very much. And so he should be a very manageable size. I want a big snake. Like, I specifically avoided getting pure superdwarfs because I think they're not big enough for what I really wanted. And so, but at the same time, the superdwarf heritage that he has should make him a very manageable size, where he's not too big, too thick around, not too heavy, and so very easy to hold up and so on. And if you watch the video that I did with Garrett, because I interviewed Garrett, the snakes that we were holding were both in about that 8-foot range, and so like they can, when they can coil up on your arm a bunch and then fit there, and then you have only a few extra feet of snake coming off to interact with, they're really actually a very manageable size. And part of that comes down to, as I said, they're slimmer, and they're semi-arboreal snakes. And in another episode, I'll talk about the enclosure that I have, because I've got some branches in there and so on. He really likes the branches, and actually what's interesting is he'll even eat on the branches. So he'll come out, because I've got a feeding door in the enclosure. So I want him to associate there's a special door for food, and food never comes in the normal doors. And so it's funny, at night he'll go and he'll actually sit there on the branch. He'll sit there with his head down watching the food door at night, because I always feed my snakes at night. And so he sits there, but when I bring the mouse, or well, now usually a rat these days, is very small rat. Occasionally, like, also chicks, day-old chickens, for example. And he grabs them, he pulls it up and coils it while he's hanging down from the branch. And then, I feed frozen thawed, but, they still always will coil their food. And then he actually eats it while he's hanging down from the branch, which I actually love, because there is zero chance of him ever eating any substrate, mostly coconut bark type substrate, when he eats hanging from the tree, from the tree branch, because there's nothing around. And he loves climbing. He really enjoys climbing. Like, sometimes I've taken him outside and I'm standing under shallow tree branches and I suddenly feel him getting lighter and look up, and there he is trying to get into the trees. So, he'll also go and spend time on the ground, and he'll hang out on the ground, but he loves to climb. He really enjoys climbing, and he's very good at holding on. Also interesting, which, my arm's too thick. Let's see if I can do it. If you look at this pattern, by the way it goes around and forms these loops, my arm's very thick for him to climb, but that's actually how they tend to climb. They loop, they don't wrap all the way around, they form these loops on both sides, which are actually really good at being able to extend and then pinch on and then extend the next one. So it's really interesting to watch, but they can also just grab onto things fairly easily and then like halfway surround and just hold on. And that semi-arboreal nature, they're really good at, like, if you put them against something and they're not feeling secure, they'll grab onto it in some way. So, like a video I plan to make at some point, they're amazingly good climbers. A video I plan to make at some point is like he can climb a rope, like a vertical rope. He can just hold onto it and uses about 3 segments where he pinches onto it and then extends up, pinches on, extends the middle one, grabs, extends the bottom one, and he can work his way up a vertical rope, which is kind of something to see. So, as I said, something I'll show. The other thing, at some point I will show pictures of where he started. He's a lot bigger than where he was. As Garrett described, superdwarfs tend to grow pretty quickly for about the first 6 months, then slow down. So far that seems to be the case. Like, he's a lot longer than he used to be. The thing is, he's still a small snake. Like, I'm looking forward to when he's a lot bigger than this. Because he's very small. Like, because he's so thin. So, I mean, retics are long, thin snakes always. But when they get longer, they do get thicker, even though they stay small thin in comparison to something like a ball python. Also interesting, what Garen mentioned, when you're talking about wild type retics, although it's most retics in general, they're yellow pigmentation. And I don't know how well you can see it here, but something kind of fascinating is that their yellow pigmentation starts off kind of brown colored, and then it gets more yellow as they age. With each shed, they get a little more yellow. It gets to be more of a vibrant yellow. Now, there are morphs that will change that, like the Sunfire is one, and Lemon Glow is one, but what do you call it? It's a codominant trait that when you get 2 copies, it becomes leucistic. And Garrett did a video all about it, and I'm forgetting it at the moment. Platinum. Yeah, I think it's platinum reticulated python. So the platinum tends to make them a lot brighter yellow, and they'll actually get supposedly kind of like highlighter yellow color, whereas wild type reticulated pythons get more like a lemon yellow color. And that's very much been happening. Like, his colors have gotten his yellows have gotten much more yellow. He used to. Now, that said, what's also interesting is, like, the color here is almost like, by his neck, is almost like a mustard yellow. And then it gets more yellow until you're getting by the tail, which is much more of a, like, just a yellow. Like, it's a dark yellow right now, although in the tail, I doubt you'll be able to see it very clearly from there. But in the tail, it's actually like a relatively bright yellow, even in the tail. It used to, in this section, like, it used to be a fairly copper color with this being brown. And so it's been turning much more yellow as he's gotten older. It's supposed to take several years to really get to their full yellow. Another thing that's really weird and kind of curious, something interesting to know about picking, if you're picking a reticulated python, which surprised me, is they can change how dark they are very considerably. And so, like, it's not as fast as an octopus. Like, in nature shows, you'll see an octopus go somewhere, then, like, it'll look down, and then suddenly, like, a second later, it will change its color to match the surroundings that it's in. Retics take a few hours in order to what's called fire up. And I suppose the opposite of that is firing down. But in both basically in everything except the blacks, they can get much darker, or they can get much lighter. At its darkest, the gray color, and it's a really pretty steel gray actually at present, but the gray color in these sort of flames in between the dots can get anywhere from like a fairly dark gray to an almost whitish color. Like, when he is super fired up, it looks like a sort of almost whitish color. Like, it's not fully white. It's not like paper white, but it's almost whitish. Like, it's such a light gray. And his yellows, when he does that, are very yellow. The actual blacks stay black all the time, no matter what. But so one of the things that's weird when you look at reticulated python, so like if you're picking out a baby, it's especially difficult because on the one hand, you have to kind of foresee what the color changes will be over time. And the other thing is you also have to take into account that when you're looking at them, you have to sort of figure out how fired up they are when you're looking at them, because their coloration is almost at its extremes is almost like two different snakes. One is can be pretty darn dark, and the other can be very light with very high contrast in the yellows and the blacks and so on. And so they're very variable. It's really kind of fascinating to see that. Like, I at some point I want to try to find out if anyone's ever looked into how on earth they do that. Because I know in like octopuses, for example, they have, I think it's chromatophores. They have like essentially melanin containing, or cells containing pigments that they can close over. And so there'll be like a light colored tissue that can be contracted over it, closing it so you can't see the dark part, you only see the light part. Or they can open a bit, or they can open it all the way, and so the very light part, the light part will become very, very small, so small you can barely see it, and the dark part will be like almost the entirety of the outside of the octopus. I have no idea how. I kind of tend to assume these guys aren't doing the same thing. I don't know how they do it though. It's weird because like they can lighten up quite considerably in say 20 minutes. Like it's pretty fast. They don't tend to do it quickly, but they can in some circumstances. Like when it's dark and they get cold, they can get dark pretty. I'm sorry, when it's cold and dark out, seems to be related to when they tend to get darker. One thing I've noticed with Aristotle is that when he's on his branch in particular, like perched on his branch, which means sort of wrapped around it and coiled, he tends to lighten up, and the lights are on. He tends to fire up quite a lot at that point. So what even drives it, I'm not entirely clear on. And it seems like people aren't generally sure. It has something to do with mood and ambient lighting, how warm they are. It seems likely like if they're cold, they can darken up to help absorb more light if they're basking. Although they're a somewhat nocturnal species, so it's a little bit weird that would, if that is generally used for basking. But I mean, they will be active during the day. They're just sort of normally sleep more during the day and are more active at night. I don't think it's a perfect sort of always or sleep during the day sort of thing though. Anyway, but so like how much they change is kind of sort of amazing. Just throughout the day. And so, I mean, so much so that like there isn't really a real coloration to the snake. They can look very different depending on things, and the same, snake will reliably look different, within the day and across days and so on. So, something I've been learning about them is that you don't pick a look when you pick a reticulated python. You pick sort of a family of looks in terms of what they look like. Now, I believe this changes a fair amount with morphs. Like albinos can't darken up or fire down, for example, because they can't produce any melanin. Actually, I don't even know that, come to think of it. I'm assuming that they can't. I need to check with somebody who knows albinos whether or not they can fire up and down or not. I tend to assume they can't. That's one reason why people like them, is that they always look, bright yellow. I don't know. So actually, that's something I need to look into. But anyhow, so it's been fascinating so far. I mean, he's still a very young reticulated python. He's very friendly, but babies are babies. Like he still can be frightened a little bit. Like if you're foolishly like grab him really quickly, every now and again he can still like feel a little bit defensive. But in general, he's extremely like he's very, very enjoyable to handle. He's not aggressive in the slightest. I let my children hold him, and he does really well with them. And so like the one thing, one time had a mild incident where he was out for far too long. Nobody got hurt or anything. It was just it kept him out for hours and put him away and had just taken him out again, and he got a little cranky there, and I think he probably, we're not entirely sure what happened, but he probably like got a little hurt or something and got a little defensive there, and it's just sort of a reminder. He's not able to like cause any damage at this point. It's far too small, so it's just a little reminder to like remember that he is still a young retic and to put him away and let him rest, because like he's not fully developed in terms of his brain and stuff. So but other than that, one time when we're just pushing things way too much, and it was a reminder, don't push things. Like he's always so gentle and just curious, likes exploring. He tends to find hair very interesting. My son's hair is his favorite hair. He often will go and sort of go explore hair and look around in it. And so he's been really quite a pleasure. I've really been enjoying him. There's been a lot I've been learning. It's been really interesting. Just the practicalities of actually living with Retic and finding out what they're like. And I love them. I love them so much. I mean, I would highly, so far, I mean, I'm only 5.5, 6 months, something like that, into having him. And, we'll see, I obviously I cannot speak to what him as an adult is like because he's not there yet. But I really have been enjoying having him tremendously. And it's other than just, he's so good that, can get lulled into a forgetting that he's a baby. Other than that, and that only happened once. I mean, he's just such a great snake. And so far, I've got to say, I really am enjoying having a Superdwarf Reticulated python. They're really wonderful snakes. They're beautiful snakes. They're interesting. They're active. They're intelligent. He's actually starting to become interested. Like my son and I sometimes will open the door and just sit there, and he'll come out and look at us and sniff around at us a bit. And that's really a lot of fun. As I said, by the way, about the food door, and this is one thing I do, I can recommend from experience so far, is that since I have the front doors to my enclosure, where I put them in and take them out through the front doors, and then on the side I have a special door that I use there to feed him, and I only ever feed at night. And so the various things that indicate he's being fed now are very, very distinct from when I take him out. And so he has never thought he has been fed, being fed when I go to take him out through the front doors. Because I've literally never once have I ever fed him like that. So it's still the case, I'm still cautious. Like, snakes tend to spend most of their time asleep, and they are ambush predators who have to be able to react, in a moment. So, like, don't grab them before you even know that they're awake. There are a few things that, like, you need to always be sensible about, so far as I can tell. And, I'm not an expert, but so far it's been working well. That, like, I'll open the doors, which is relatively noisy, and then I'll make sure that he's moving so I can tell that he's actually awake and sees me, and then I'm not going to wake him up by touching him. And if I don't see him move in response to that, I'll do some tapping, I'll talk to him, and if that doesn't get his attention, I'll tap, like, on whatever he's sitting on, so he feels the tapping and then comes up and looks around and sees me, and then I just reach over and pick him up, and I've never had the least trouble with that. So I know for a lot of people, especially if they're using rack systems or anything like that, they tap train the snake, where they use like a piece of metal to tap them on the head to let them know they're not being fed. I haven't been doing any of that because I have feeding so very different than being handled. And so far, so good. So far, it's been working extremely well, where, as I said, since I feed at night, once the lights go off in his enclosure, he will go over and sit on the branch above the food door and stare down at the food door. And I've periodically gone and opened the front door and touched him, pet him, even picked him up or whatever, even when the lights are out, to let him know that the lights being out doesn't mean it's always food if he's being interacted with. So he's used to, just because the lights are out doesn't mean there'll be food. And sort of the one other thing is to bear in mind that a retic is intelligent, but doesn't speak English. And so you can tell them, this is the food door, food will always come from here. But what they see is, so far, food has always been here. But that doesn't mean that there's no place in the world other than that where there is food, logically speaking. And so, like, he'll know that when I open the door and reach in to pick him up, that's definitely not a time when he's being fed. But if I'm varying it, so like the first few times especially, when he kind of like showed some interest and came over just to look at us, I made sure to give him plenty of space, to be very calm, so that especially the first few times we're doing this, because it's new, he's not thinking, well, maybe there's food here, because this is a new situation I'm not familiar with. And so I was just extra careful to make sure when it was new that everything is very clear and very definitely not a food situation. And then quite quickly he learned, okay, this too is not a food situation. And so now he doesn't, now it's, it can, you never want to take him for granted, but it's very clear that he doesn't think there's any chance of being fed now, after he's had a bunch of experience in, like, me sitting down at the level of the bottom of his cage, because his cage is not the bottom cage in the stack. And I love how long they can stretch out, by the way. I've seen him go like a full half of his body, as right now he's, I think, trying to get to the ficus, but they're so strong and can stretch out so far. Anyway, but so, like, if you can possibly design a separate food door into your enclosure, so far my first 6 months of experience in keeping him says that this works extremely well. That that when you have a food door which is just very, very separate from the front door, and so, like, I literally stand on the side where he can't even see me. So, I mean, obviously he sees me walk in front of it, and so if I walk in front of it and disappear, he gets very excited. But like, he doesn't see me when I'm doing the food door, and it's a little door. I slide it open, and then I can stick the food item in, and so he gets very, very excited if I'm doing anything over in the corner by where the food door is going to happen. But he focuses all his attention on the food door itself, not on the front of the door. And it's just been, so far, really, really successful in, he never thinks he's being fed when I'm reaching in to take him out so far. So far, so good. You never want to take anything for granted. As I said, I am careful that when I do reach in, I always make sure he's awake first and sees me first, so that he he's aware of what's going on and doesn't have to make any snap decisions. But other than that, so far so good, and I can really recommend the whole food door approach. Completely separate food door, different side of the enclosure sort of thing. So far so good. I've really enjoyed that, or I've really enjoyed how well that has been working, and how he just does not think maybe there's going to be food when I come in the main way. So anyway, I will. I'll, at some point, I'm going to do an episode about the actual enclosure that I do have for him. I'll be doing periodic videos just to show his growth rate and changes and what he looks like and so on over time, and just to talk about them, because I really enjoy talking about snakes. So yeah, I've got to say, if you're considering a Superdwarf Reticulated python from Out Reptiles, so far my first 6 months have been extremely good. The one thing is, I'm looking forward to when he's a lot bigger than this, and I just need to be patient. And but Garrett has much smaller bloodlines than what he comes from. As I said, I specifically wanted a larger bloodline in small retics, because I don't want a 14-foot mainland retic, but something where he's supposed to get 8-9 feet, and something like 6 to 8 pounds, or maybe 8 to 10 pounds, maybe rather, for his bloodline, something like that. A very, very manageable size of big snake, and also the reputation they have for being intelligent snakes. Yeah, like, he is a fast learner. You have to bear in mind that snakes have their own interests and concerns, and things that they don't care about, they don't tend to be good at, just like every other living thing in the world, including human beings. Things that people don't care about, they don't tend to get good at. But yeah, like, he's just like no snakes like it when you touch their head, for example. But like, the first time I touched his head, he pulled back in fright. the second time he touched his head, he sort of like winced very slightly, and like by the third time, he had figured out that nothing bad comes from this, and like every now and then he doesn't want his head being touched, but other than that, like he you can just he figured it out really quickly. They learn, like things like where food comes from, how things are done, what isn't a threat, and so on. They learn that stuff rather quickly, and also they're explorative. They enjoy seeing what things are and going around and looking. And sometimes I let them go climb on my monitors. So I've got my computer monitors from my perspective over there, and they'll go climb on that and then climb onto the ledge above it and so on. Or sometimes sometimes he actually goes and sits on the camera. It'll climb up on top of it and then perch on the camera like a perch and just go watching around. So if you are considering it, my experience from the first 6 months is that they're wonderful snakes, and I can definitely recommend Garrett's Bloodlines. So, I'm going to keep making these things for years because he won't be an adult for another, 4 or 5 years, really. So I plan to keep up with it, but it's going to take a few years to wait a few years. And so, yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.